you're in Florida, right?
That's right. Yeah, been here my whole life. So they say that like anywhere you live, you're at least 40 minutes from the beach. I've gone to like some VR events, some more just student events type of thing, just to get vibes of like everybody that's and what they're working on, their projects. It's cool. They're working on some really cool stuff. So this had me thinking about like people going to school for game dev. And I think one of the biggest things that you get is the relationship with other people that are in your same area of expertise, I guess I'd put it.
Right.
And so you can tell that they all have their little groups and they're all really like into each other's projects. I think that's something that people would appreciate when going to like a game design school, which they're not popping up more and more around here.
Sure.
I guess, everywhere. Like I started off doing animation, not even game design stuff.
It comes through, by the way. You like the stuff that
does.
you do. You know, it's good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I went for animation, and afterwards, I made a lot of connections. And the very first people that gave me a job were teachers that really liked my stuff and decided that I was good enough to work in their businesses. That I think is the biggest thing that people can take away is you do develop this community, that sense of like growing together and making projects together and all that. And so I still talk to those people, and we've jammed together and done some game jams, but that's what I see when I go to those groups, that community building.
Right. See, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I watched a documentary like a month or so ago, the indie scenes around the world. But one of the parts in that documentary is about like a train ride jam. It's like all these people start at one train station and they get on the train, start the jam, and during the whole duration of the train ride to their destination, that's the jam. And then whenever they arrive,
that's cool.
But anyways, that sort of thing had got me thinking about like, that's something I want. And even when I was setting up my channel's Game Jam, I was talking to Jean and Alex of Playmaker, and they were just like talking about the jams that they've been through the past and how there was sort of like professionals or more advanced, the veterans that would walk around and help people out during the jam. So anybody that gets stuck in a problem, there would be somebody physically there who could like lean over your shoulder and be like, no, do this, and that. And I was like, that sounds like that would be fucking amazing, And that's where the idea of the whole tech support hotline thing came in.
The mentorship.
Right, exactly. It's like you don't need mentorship, but like, goddamn, I imagine that would help a lot of people. It certainly would have helped me. How often is that on your mind? Do you ever feel kind of like, oh, I'm a little like isolated or lonely here on the internet making my games in my dark cave?
So I have like a need for mentorships as well. I've helped people, but I think it's really important to have somebody that can guide you through your process. Like I hear about Miyamoto and how I recently heard about his mentor and how he helped him develop Mario and gave him all these tips and guidance. And so it seems like some of the best developers have had their mentors guide them into where they are now. Makes it seem like that is the best road to make great games, even though I'm sure you can do it without mentors. I mean,
sure, of course.
It does make it easier. And so that's why I always try to help. Like whenever I learn anything, I'm always trying to think of like, okay, I spent so much time on this. I know this was a big hurdle. I think it would be valuable if somebody else learns faster than I did, so that we can, as a community, keep growing and moving together.
A little backstory to the folks watching this. I found your actions, right? Like that's how I know you. Right. Is I found your VR actions. I was like, okay, I'm going to make a VR game. Here's these Steam 2.0 Playmaker actions. Thing that I saw like somewhere in the comments, I think somebody said like, oh, he responds very quickly. If you need any help, like just hit him up. And sure enough, like I was like, okay, I was total noob at the time, and what I asked in retrospect was probably more of an apparent answer than I cared to admit, but you were very quick to respond and you were very helpful. And I remember being like, okay, so like this is my first taste of like, or one of the first tastes of the Playmaker community that I got. Even just broadly, the game dev community. My background's in film. And there is community there. It's unavoidable. It's like really baked into the medium, right? So as far as like being collaborative and constantly being around people because you're on sets and you need actors, and even though it was baked in that way, I found it harder to feel like a part of something. I found it harder to feel like I've had community than I have with game stuff. All the game dev stuff, I've really felt like I've been a part of something.
We're building something that people are going to look back on, and this whole legacy building. That is a really cool feeling. I personally don't think I've had that yet. I think it'd be really cool, but that is a really cool sensation.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because it's like whether or not you feel it, that's who cares. But I think the fact remains is that like we are in the middle of something very interesting. Like you're totally a part of this history of something that's like people will be looking back on, and like this is. I'm always comparing it to film again. Like that's just what I have to do, right? Like because I come from film, comparing it always to film. This reminds me of the 1960s in cinema, which is just like right. People got their Bolex cameras and were out making movies on the streets, and that's kind of where I feel like maybe games are right now.
I guess when you put it that way, I see how visual scripting is constantly evolving. Visual scripting is going to be more normalized. I constantly think that, how like your parents, when, they're like not technologically savvy, you need to help them out with everything.
Right.
I always think that the next generation is going to be everybody's going to be coding like a second language.
Yeah.
Or maybe visual scripting.
Sure.
Actually.
Programming to some degree, like logic.
Yeah. And then our generation is going to be the ones that whoever hasn't picked up coding is going to need their kids to help them code some how do I code the fridge to do this and that, right? So I can completely see where you're coming from. There's like a renaissance with programming and how it's going to allow more and more people to bridge this gap.
Seriously, especially with like creatives, right? Because like that is another thing too. That's a really good point, because now what that's making me think of is like putting a Bolex, a 16 millimeter camera in the hands of some students in the 1960s is one thing, but like putting a DV camera in the hands of somebody, like where they're almost like they grew up with knowing how to run a camera, or for that matter, like kids with a phone that have had a camera on it since the moment they were holding their phone. It's just a button they press and they could make movies instantaneously. It removes all of the technical know-how, How long have you been making games for? Or how long have you been programming stuff for, I should ask?
I have been using Playmaker since 2012.
Okay.
But I have been creating Flash games.
Right on.
Yeah. Since Flash wasn't owned by Adobe. It was Macromedia. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And so I would make Flash... I'd make Flash animations and Flash games. I originally wanted to be in film and animation. I was like looking into going to Pixar, and I had like this internship at Three House Studios. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No, that sounds familiar.
Previz studio.
Okay.
I sort of just turned into game dev. For me, my whole thing is how can I tell stories that I want to tell, and that could be through film or animations or games. And games was something that just called out to me the most. I've been making games ever since I could remember. Even just board games. I like to make board games as well, and
same.
Still doing it today.
What's the furthest memory you have of like making a game of any kind, however abstract that definition is?
I have spotty memories of me, my cousin, and my brother.
Yeah.
We came up with our own video game studio. And
how old? At what age?
8 years old, 6 to 8.
Okay.
And like I convinced them that we needed to invest money into this, and so we used our birthday money to like invest, and we all put in $20 to start our game business. I don't know what happened to that money. I returned the money to them afterwards, money that I just had because I felt bad about it.
Yeah.
I've always had this idea of making my own studio. As far as making games, I have been making like random games with whatever objects that were around me for as long as I can remember. Like using billiards, I'd make up a new game or a new type of game of tag or whatever was around us.
I love the entrepreneurial spirit, by the way. I totally feel that. I've always I don't know if you ever watched like Ed, and Eddie.
Yeah.
I've always kind of
totally.
They're my spirit animals in some way. And there's always this sort of like, I feel like with a lot of creatives, there is that link to having that entrepreneurial spirit where it's kind of like, oh, we like, there needs to be some sort of like professionalism or like really kind of taking your creative work seriously.
It's important, yeah.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. If you want your games to just be something that you do as a hobby, then that's fine, and that's a lot of people do that. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But if you want your games to be a business, sell these games, then you have to treat it as a business, and you have to be professional about it. Yeah. That's why whenever I release my assets, I know that my name is on these assets. I was committed to making sure that I always have that Gmail window open, and the second I see anything, no matter what, I'll have my phone. I'll be anywhere. I'd be on a date or something, and I'd see the thing pick up, and I'd say, "Just 1 second." It's. But she understands because she has her own business too. She has 3 businesses. My wife. It's part of it. That's your name on the line.
That's beautiful. I love that relationship.
Professionally, yeah.
Were you answering my email on a date?
No. Maybe. I don't think so.
Like I have a lot of memories from childhood from me and friends where it's like there's this fascination with like making up like rules and sort of imagining sort of like systems almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
same, yeah.
I'm wondering where also Flash came in. So that's kind of, you're telling me about like making up games and stuff with your friends, but at what point did you look at games on the internet and go like, oh shit, like is that something I can...
Flash came up with my dad. He always saw that I was really interested in drawing and like I do flip books, and
that
so
makes sense.
I didn't even see Flash animations online. He just showed me this program.
Wow.
And I started toying with it. I learned how to do a bouncing ball. I didn't have any animation books or anything. I just tried it out until I kept on going with it. I did the whole stick figure, and from there on, I eventually saw Newgrounds and the whole Flash community.
Right.
And I started uploading, and I would get, I don't know if you remember Blammed.
Yeah.
It's on Newgrounds.
Absolutely. Yep. I've had many Blammed submissions.
I had Blammed submissions, and I think that all helped me, gain this shell of critiques. I know that a lot of people have a hard time with that, but you just got to keep putting your work out there. And that's what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was just putting it out there and letting people plan my work, or eventually get 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, and going up.
My submissions would get blammed, but then I can go to that little graveyard page where my dead submission is and still read through all the reviews. And I remember that even losing that it was still a gratifying experience because you could still see all the feedback. Do you remember some of the things that people were saying?
Yeah, it was mainly like, I've gotten like kill yourself type of comments, like,
Same.
Just quit what you're doing. I mean, I've gotten that with games. My very first game that I made in Playmaker.
Oh no shit! Really? What, on Itch?
Yeah.
Where did you submit it?
It's on Game Jolt.
Oh, okay, Game Jolt. So there's even that kind of community that exists on Game Jolt then. That kind of Newgrounds.
Yeah. I mean,
oh fuck.
I made this game called Je suis Pierre, and some guy asked if I spoke French. I told him I didn't. I just was inspired by this time period in France, and so he left me nonetheless a very, very long comment in French.
Oh boy.
And I had to translate it, and he told me to quit. He said that I shouldn't be making games. This was the worst thing that he's ever played, and that he created an account just to say this message. And I was moved by this, like,
sure.
I can't remember taking these negative comments in a bad way. I just see it as like, wow, this person was so emboldened or passionate of leaving a review that he had to make an account and write this whole essay. That's really cool. I mean,
it's kind of cool
that my game did this. Even if it's negative, I just commented saying, look forward to the next one. I hope you enjoy the next one.
Yeah. No, you handled that very well, it sounds. I was going to say, I got a lot of the same thing. And I constantly bring that up to people, not only in game development, but even doing film stuff, with a lot of friends who are always afraid of like putting out their projects. I mean, even like friends who are musicians or like anything, there's always this talk about being too afraid to put out your work, letting the anxieties of critique and just being in the public eye, letting that like stop you. Mm-hmm. And the thing that always comes up for years and years, I've always gone to bringing up Newgrounds. I really thank my lucky stars for having that opportunity to get sort of shit on and torn up, but also to like to build it up and kind of realize that like when there's so much of it, when there's like 50 reviews back, go kill yourself, this is the worst thing ever, like especially seeing it at a young age, you kind of get desensitized to it and you realize like, oh, like this kind of doesn't mean anything. And so it's okay, I could just put out as much as I want because who's gonna stop me?
My dad and I would laugh about it.
That's fucking awesome. That is some real father-son bonding shit right there.
Yeah. I've been trying to get into coding forever, as long as I could remember as well. I tried to get into ActionScript. My very first time using ActionScript, I thought that if you just tell the computer, hey, player runs left and shoots, and I just wrote it out, what I thought the computer would understand, and I was just like, nothing's working. I don't know how to get this to work. So I just stuck to animation.
Right. Until
visual scripting, which finally let me make the games that I wanted to make.
When did that start? Did that really kick off with Playmaker?
So I did make little games with Flash.
Okay.
Really basic buttons that you just click at the right time.
Right. Action. So, what are they called? QuickTime events, kind of like QuickTime events.
I do QuickTime events. I got really inspired by Metal Gear, and so I remembered making like a really big Metal Gear campaign type of situation, but it was all with stick figures and a helicopter that would attack you, and so it was all just QTE. It was never really like a side scroller or anything more advanced than that, or a first person shooter. It was just, my games just basically consisted of these choices that you would make.
Those are fundamentals for game design.
I was pretty much making like Telltale type of games,
right,
with Flash.
Right. Like, what were your inspirations for gaming? Like the type of games that you were playing?
The first game that I've ever beaten was Super Metroid.
Okay, right on.
It was really atmospheric. I love the setting and being lost in this world and fighting your way out. There was just something about that really just, it made me want to complete the whole game. I've never completed a game prior to that. Maybe because I couldn't do it physically.
Sure.
These games were hard.
Yeah.
That was one of the first ones that really got me into like what games can do. I didn't think I wanted to be a game developer back then though. I was just really intrigued by that, by Zelda, Nintendo games in general.
Sure.
That's what we had. I think that's what slowly started me on this path. What feelings I want to capture now in my games, I go back to those.
Okay, so Super Metroid, it sounds like a lot of it is kind of like building the atmosphere stuff.
I read this book recently called The Power of Moments.
Okay.
And it made me realize that one of the things that I love so much about video games is when they give you like these big lasting moments. I think you called it in your last interview, what was it? It was Battlefield.
Oh, DICE. Right. They cut like the unique anecdote generators or something like that.
Anecdote generators, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think of like these powerful moments in those games, like when you're playing Super Metroid and you're trying to escape the ship, or when Ridley comes out for the first time and just starts attacking you, or how they subvert the genre and so it's just all these moments where I'm constantly just surprised and loving it. Those are the moments that I want to show in the games that I create, for sure.
What other games have you beaten?
Recently, I like to call it research. I mean, you have to play games if you're making games.
Absolutely.
And I have started a lot of games, and I like seeing great intros, because unfortunately, people that are consuming games, they only get to the intro, and so you got to make a really lasting impression when it comes to a good intro. Thinking about Edith Finch because of your last interview.
Yeah.
We beat that one. My wife and I. We played Bioshock again, and she beat that recently. I think that's the last one, but that I beat myself.
I did just beat Bioshock. I've played Bioshock a million times growing up. Like as a teenager, I was originally playing it on the 360, and then years later I would buy it on the PC. I never beat it. I always got pretty far. I think I always got to who's the crazy artist that makes you take the pictures. That's around usually when I would fall off, maybe a little bit after that. So I've played through Bioshock multiple times, but never finished it. I finally, while I was in Paris, I got it again because of all this, all the stuff happening lately with immersive sims kind of coming, like rising to the top. I was like,
yeah, you're doing your research.
Yeah, exactly. Just like you said, I'm doing my research, and I got really hooked on it and started playing it all the way through. And this is on my like last week or so of being in Paris. So on the flight back from Paris to JFK, I'm like draining the last bit of my battery in my laptop just to finish Bioshock. The AC adapter in the plane did not support my laptop charger. Is too juicy. But yeah. During the layover, I'm sitting there in the little Admirals Club thing, the waiting lounge. Everybody's living their lives around me, and I beat Bioshock finally. I remember it being like, oh shit, like this is fucking heavy. Like the little spoiler alert, the little sisters come, and all this crazy shit about your life after. And I just remember being like, taking off my headphones and like looking around, and everybody else is just kind of living their lives still, and it's just like nobody knows what just all happened right here.
Yeah, you just had this powerful moment.
Yeah,
and you sort of like want to share it with somebody, right?
You do. You wish somebody was there.
Yeah.
So wait, hold on. Are you saying you beat it with your wife, or you beat Edith Finch with your wife, or did you do Bioshock as well with her?
Both.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does she play games much? Like, is she kind of really involved in that?
Yeah, I think because of me, I got her really involved. I mean, she used to.
Sure.
But now I think I'm like showing her the games that I would play, and Bioshock was the latest one because I thought it was a fantastic game.
Right.
And that one has, just like Metroid, an amazing atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
That I think is a little bit similar. You're by yourself. It has like this spooky setting. I don't consider it a horror game, even though she did.
Yeah.
But as you said, you have these epic, powerful moments. And I was curious what you thought of the ending, because it sort of gets into a very shootery type of game towards the end.
Yeah.
A lot less story. You're just like running and gunning.
Right.
More towards the final chapters, which while watching her replay it, I didn't remember those moments as vividly as I did with The Artist.
Right.
That one I remember very, very much, but the last chapters, I understand now why I didn't remember. It's because it was very run and gun, and there wasn't a lot of story or powerful moments, like I was just mentioning before.
Right.
I do remember the ending.
Sure. The actual story part, right, yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure what he meant by this, but I've seen an interview with Ken Levine where he says, like, somebody says, like, how do you create a great ending or something like that? And his answer was like, I think you're asking the wrong guy, because my track record for making a good ending isn't very good. So he even has like qualms, it sounds like, with his own endings. And I'm not sure if he meant the story ending, the literal last moments of the game, or if it meant the lead up in those levels and all the shootery bits. If he even means the boss fight, because I even heard him talk shit about his own games. He's like, oh, we always end up doing a fucking boss fight, and he's like, whenever we get to the end, I'm always like, okay, let's finish this game without doing a boss fight, and then we end up doing a boss fight. You mentioned playing these games with your wife, and even though she has her own experiences with it, that like you've wanted to share a lot of what you experienced growing up and stuff. And this seems to be a common thing. Like there's even a fucking YouTube channel dedicated to it. Do you ever watch
it? Yeah.
My girlfriend reviews?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting thing that's happening, because it's like this interesting balance that you have to strike between not being a mansplainy, aggressive, like pushing your interests on your partner if they don't like it genuinely, but also like there's a real beauty and magic in sharing something that we love so much with each other, and so why should games be any different? So I'm kind of wondering like what your experiences have been like having a partner and going through what you described right now is kind of like sharing, like how's she taken to it and how's that been going?
She definitely does it because she sees my interest in it, but I also at the same time try to cater my choices based on what I think she would enjoy.
Sure.
Like for instance, there was another game that just came out, Boyfriend Dungeon.
Oh, I've heard about this.
I didn't beat that one. I just watched her beat that one.
Okay.
And she went through the whole story by herself, and she was really, really into it. I sort of am still trying to gauge what she's into and what she isn't into. Like one game that I love is Symphony of the Night, Castlevania.
Okay, sure.
She just tried it for 2 seconds and wasn't into it, and so I'm completely okay with that.
That is a very understandable reaction, whoever you are.
Yeah. And so I said, all right, no worries, let's move on to another one.
Yeah.
And I mean, it'll be like, I guess, months before I show her another game that I'm like, oh, this game is on a deal. I want you to check it out, and then maybe we'll do it on a weekend or something. And if she's really into it, she'll keep playing on her own, type of thing. And if she's not, I just see right away, and I'm like, you don't like. She'll want to keep playing it for my sake, but I don't want her to like force herself to play this thing that she's not enjoying. That wouldn't make sense.
Right. That's so sweet. That's such a kind reaction. That's such a heartwarming reaction to have where she's like, I want to keep going, even though, like, for you. It sounds like you guys have something very healthy and very cool going on there. The question that I had to come to that I'm always excited to ask is the crying in video games. Have you ever played a game that made you cry? And if so, which one or which ones? And yeah, tell me that story. Or does it exist?
Yeah, so I really wanted to think of one. I was just like, oh, maybe this one, but I couldn't think of a game that really brought that out of me. Okay. When it comes to movies or songs, that'll get me easily.
Sure.
But for some reason, games, even though I understand how powerful they are, and you're in it would make more sense that you cry for a game than for a movie.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I just have a disconnection where, since I'm the character, I'm just like letting that sit in and having my own feelings towards it, but I haven't had that reaction yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Sure. I love hearing the anecdotes from people who have cried during games, because it's always like, oh, that's a trippy way to respond. Like in the last one with Luis crying to MGS, like, oh yeah, I remember that being heavy, but he, he responded really strongly to that, and that's cool. And it's strange.
And your Papers, Please.
Oh, man, for me,
I really loved Papers, Please, and Lucas Pope and Obra Dinn. I mean, all his games are fantastic. And I remember that scene that's a powerful moment.
It really is.
That happened, and I'm sorry, ma'am, you just cannot go through. I gotta do my job type of thing. Like, the game has put you in a point where, depending on how you play, you sort of like lose that empathy for people, because you're more concerned with your kid and the little drawing that he made for you. And I put that up and everything. I was completely invested. But I had to tell that lady, no, I couldn't do it.
I think this is what I'm starting to catch on to, is like, the more I get into I'm playing all these different games, and the more I hear from other people, like what their experience has been, it does seem harder to create that really strong emotional connection through games. And I think, like you said a moment ago, there has to be something linked to, like, that you're an active participant in it. So in that moment, maybe there's a part of your brain that's either, I'm not articulating this quite well, and I think there's probably a lot of research that has to be done about this shit, but yeah, there's definitely something that is like a wall between the player and the game.
It's interesting. Moment that really blew me away was with Last of Us, playing the first Last of Us.
Okay.
Something huge happened with some minor characters.
Okay.
And at that point, it was just a cutscene. But it was a cutscene done very well.
Okay.
And that, I remember, like, I think dropping the control and just taking a moment. Have you played Journey?
No, or I played a little bit of it, but I haven't gone through the whole campaign. No,
PC now.
Yeah.
And so that game, I went online and I saw a review for it, and it just said, "Don't read this review, just buy the game." And that was the first time that I went upstairs, I bought the game immediately, and I played Journey, and so I knew nothing about that game.
It's a great way to go in.
And at this point, everybody knows what Journey is about.
Right.
It has online play, and I didn't know that.
It's so good.
I was playing the game, and you start off by yourself.
Yeah.
And so up until the second level, your online player, your companion that goes through this whole journey with you, shows up. I'm like, wow, this is pretty good AI. I didn't know. And so my partner just kept on jumping around and doing all this stuff that is not typical of AI until I realized, I think this is an online player.
That's so fucking crazy. Yeah.
And then my mind just blew right there when I realized that we are going on this journey together with this person that I don't know, and you can't speak.
Right.
It's a game where, you know, you're just doing these little sound effects, your emotes. You're going on this whole journey, and you go through hardships. You know, you fail, you rise again, and that is a beautiful game that I recommend it to people that have never played games before. That is one of those artistic things that everyone should try, is how I put it.
What projects lately have you been working on, and kind of like, have you been able to interject those type of things in your games yet, like these type of moments that you're describing? Like, how's that been going?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you've been really delving into the immersive sim type of area, because that is pretty much building systems so that people have moments.
Right.
It's powerful, building these systems that allow players to just playground into doing it their way, which is amazing. Games allow this. The same can be said with stories that are these manufactured moments.
Of course, totally. Like pre-authored moments.
Yeah, like Undertale. Have you beat Undertale?
No, I haven't even begun. Or actually, I played the first 2 minutes of it, but I was like, I need to. But yeah, I do understand that it's like super manufactured. That it's like one man's vision and everything.
Right, and there are some characters that, when you're battling them, they do things in interesting ways that subvert their own rule set, but in an interesting way.
Sure.
And so I have my Western VR game.
Right.
And it's going in the direction of an immersive sim where I want you to feel like you're this cowboy that went into town and is trying to either help everybody or do whatever you want. You can be a bank robber. You can just become a sheriff and take down these ghosts that are littered throughout, referencing a lot of Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider, situation like Yojimbo, Man with No Name. I did all this research of like train robberies and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, all fantastic movies, or The Wild Bunch. And I wanted to get these moments and put it into the game, and so that was what I was focusing on. But the issue came up with feature creep. I mean, with all these different elements that I wanted to put in, I moved on to the next shiny thing. That game sort of went onto the back burner, but now it is, thanks to Philip from the Playmaker community. He's helping me bring the game back, and we're working on an alpha to show people.
Fucking A. That's awesome.
What's been going on since 2016 is when that game started.
Holy shit.
It's based on The Wild Gunman. It's an old Nintendo game with a light zapper. Totally. And I referenced it with the scene from Back to the Future 2. I did a video on YouTube with Back to the Future 2 where I
think I remember that now.
You know, he's playing this arcade game which they call a baby game. But then I recreated that in VR, and there was a lot of interest in that. And so I went on and did this whole VR experience with the Western. And then I got disillusioned because I saw other games that had the exact same mechanic that I did, the whole dueling mechanic. And so like, how can I make it different or unique from that, so I'm not making the same exact thing?
Sure.
And then I just kept seeing more and more dueling games coming out. It seems like there's going to be an oversaturation in the market for these dueling games. Mine is pixelated, so I guess that's a little bit different. I needed to stand out in some way. It just at one point halted because seeming just too much for me, so I need to focus on something that is more manageable. And then I've been doing that since 2018 for a few years, and started games and never finished them. And I had to find a way to get out of that. And so that's when I started doing game jams. I've done over 30 game jams now.
That's holy shit, 30 game jams.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And a lot of them weren't even finished. I would start up a game and I did not finish during the weekend because I overscoped. Like around 10 of them I did finish.
Okay.
One of the latest ones that I did had a good reception, and so I started working on that, where I also thought, hey, let me make this in 3D. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be a high def version of this game. But then I thought, I'm getting out of my element again because I haven't really done 3D games. I've done more 2D games. I've done a lot of 2D games. I'm just like, if I want to finish something, I got to stick to sort of what I know. That's where I'm developing this other game, sort of a spin-off of that game jam.
What is this one again?
The title, I sort of joked around with because I officially put it on Steam.
Okay.
And
fucking A. That's a great start to really paint yourself into that corner, putting it on Steam, being like, this is going to get done. Interesting. Yeah. I like that. I like
Memories of a Spy on Steam?
It is not, and you just made me think, like, maybe I need to buck the fuck up and put Memories of a Spy on Steam.
Yeah. So I paid the $100, made the account. I have my company name and
figured out all your tax information and shit.
Yeah, I started the company to make these games, but then I made the assets. The current title is You Mean I Have to Go Down There and Shoot Rocks?
Okay.
I believe is the whole title.
Sure.
Which is very anime inspired, but we don't have to go into that. I've used Trello with my Western, where I just set up tasks and such.
Yeah.
And that helped for a while, but what I think was missing is that I didn't have deadlines.
Yeah.
That has been a major improvement, because for a few months, actually, I was sort of creating assets here and there. Everything was really up in the air. I didn't have a deadline, and I just had to figure out a way to buckle down and make it work. And so now I have mostly what I need planned out, and I should have an alpha by the end of this year. I should have an alpha that looks good enough to start making, promotional content, trailers and such, and have a wish list. That's my goal right now, is the wish list for the end of the year.
Right on. That sounds like a pretty good goal. I'm in a very similar camp as you right now. I definitely want to hit that mark where it's like you have something that is shareable to some degree, maybe even playable to some degree, so people can start like fussing with it and kind of giving you feedback, even if it's not complete and everything like that. I think that's a really good goal to hit.
Yeah, and it's looking great. Your game's looking great.
Oh, thank you. Have you ever seen that graph where it's like the more difficult something becomes, the more likely that you'll get frustrated and just fucking stop. But the more easy something becomes, like if it's way too simple, then you become bored with it and you just don't even want to do it. So that sweet spot is in the middle, where it's just challenging enough that it keeps your brain kind of going and trying to problem solve, but not too easy where you're just gonna be like, this is fucking stupid.
I'll look at what I graphed out for myself, and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, this is just it doesn't seem like anyone could achieve this, but I commit to it, I stick to it, and I manage to week by week pump out the content that I need for my game. I get really conflicted with what the best approaches are or advice for people starting out or that are trying to make their games.
Yeah.
Because it's also personal. Like, everybody's journey is completely different from one another. And I've read stories where somebody's like, I started off by making this big MMO and I finished it. And so
that's so ridiculous.
He people told him not to do it, and he managed to do it. But that is such a rare.
Is it the 2D MMO? Is it that one guy who does that birds one or something?
Honest, I haven't even seen what his project was, to be honest.
Okay.
But I was just taken aback by, he had something to prove, I guess, in his sense.
Right.
And so he finished it. And you hear so many times to not do this, but it worked for him.
Right.
But it's such a rare occurrence that maybe you shouldn't do it, because it's dependent on you. You gotta be able to self-reflect and know what you're capable of and how much you can push that rubber band. Anything is possible. It's just how much commitment do you have to what you're doing. If you have a roadblock, you have to find another way to make it work.
go follow him at SebastianRez. That's on Twitter and Instagram. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome.
Totally, man.